What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of All Access, the Freaktography podcast. Real quick, guys, before we get to today's interview, I have a favor to ask of you. Whatever platform you are listening to my podcast on, please leave a review on that platform and give a good review and help get this podcast seen by more people. So moving on to today's episode, I do believe I am the first and only podcast in Canada on urban exploring. The majority of my guests will be Canadian, but we will definitely be speaking with other explorers from all around the world. Today's episode comes from my Polish friend currently residing in China. Greeg is a very passionate man and explorer. He travels all over the world in search of the most incredible abandoned places. Greg's Chasing Bandos podcast launched in 2020. So enough of all that. Let's head to China and speak with my good friend Greeg. Okay, guys, here we go. Episode 3 with Greeg. He is the podcaster, is now the podcast on the All Access Freaktography podcast. So 100,000 downloads, 124,000 Instagram followers, the man behind the largest and the most listened to Urbex podcast currently. Mr. Greeg. Greeg, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being my guest. And I do have to start off by saying, I have mentioned in my previous 2 episodes that you are the inspiration for me having done this. Aww. After we did your first podcast with me, I had a lot of people reach out and say, man, you speak really well. You should do your own podcast. Then after the debate, I got even more people calling in saying, man, you were so good in that podcast. You should run your own. So I was like, I don't know. Do I have that much to say? Am I interesting enough? And then I'm like, well, it's not about me, right? It's me bringing you guys and to my audience, you know? And so anyways, I thought about it. I hummed and hawed over it. And then I decided, let's just pull the trigger on this. And I started coming up with some graphics, with a name, with my plan would be, who I'm going to talk to. And, it's all thanks to you. So I have you to thank. And let's get started. Let's get right off the bat. Tell us about Greeg.
Wait, Dave, wait. I just want to say, I'm very pleased that you're doing this. I can see the Ninjalicious inspiration in the name, right? I think I'm right there with All Access.
Yes.
Yep. There you go. And yeah, so like, I'm really pleased. Like, you were absolutely amazing on those podcasts. And then I just hope that because you are now a host of your own podcast, that you still have time to come back on Chasing Bandos, you know? Like, I still hope.
Always.
That's good. That's good.
What you've got going, which is great, is the idea behind the debate episodes and other ideas that would require a panel or a group of people. And you're actually very good at choosing who would fit into the right slot for these episodes. And that's where I'm happy to come in and add my, my knowledge, my expertise, my opinion, play the good guy, play the bad guy. I can play either way.
But you know what? At the same time, I feel like I have to tell you, like, I'm sorry because you've waited so long. Just imagine if we had this podcast with you like a year ago, like I promised. By now you would have been like, podcasting for a year. I bet.
Yeah. That's all right. It all happens. Everything falls into place for a reason. So that's great. So let's get into the. I got a number of questions to ask you. So tell us and the listeners about Greeg as a person, Greeg the explorer. How and when did you get into exploring abandoned places?
Greeg as a person is an asshole. That's all I have to say. No. Like, Greeg realized that he's an asshole and he's trying to change and not be selfish. But how would I say this? I was lucky, Dave. I must say, I was just lucky to discover this hobby. I mentioned this so many times. Like, the big event in my life was the divorce. I'm not gonna lie. This was like, I was like a nerd playing video games, on Xbox, earning achievements and stuff. And like the divorce changed everything, because like it's something that you don't expect, especially after 12 years, like I was 20 and 32, boom, the end.
Wow.
And yeah, just like didn't know anyone else, so it was all crazy. At the same time, I met this guy, and I kind of just suggested to him, hey, how about we go to Chernobyl? And he was crazy enough to agree with me. And I just I always had this fascination with those places. So like I was this nerd doing like the like playing games, but I was always like the admirer of the places, like people like you, other explorers. Like I would see this stuff. Like I didn't know this thing existed on Instagram, because I didn't really have Instagram.
Right.
I would see like from time to time some articles and things online, and I would always be amazed at like how is this possible?
Mhm.
Like how people find this? Where is this? Oh my god! So all the annoying things that people ask me now, it was like I was that guy, I was like, I couldn't believe it, and yeah, going to Chernobyl changed my life. That was the moment. I really remember this moment. Like I was standing on top of the building, looking at this panorama of this like overgrown city, and man, I just knew from that moment, or light switch moment.
Right.
I knew it. I have to find places like this. It was that, as a kid, when you open that Christmas gift, that
Yeah.
feeling you get, the excitement.
Yeah.
The 2 days I was in Chernobyl, every single moment I felt like this. It was incredible.
Changed your life, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's great. That's what I mean. You pretty much started at the top then. You got guys like me started up just doing stupid dumpy houses. You started at Chernobyl. No wonder you're so obsessed with the space shuttles, because where else can you go from Chernobyl, right? It's only down from there.
Oh man, yeah. Maybe
So you're currently based in China, but you don't look or sound Chinese. So my first thought was you might be German or Austrian. So what's your background and where are you from?
Ni hao, ni hao, ni hao ma. I am Polish. I have two passports. I have a British passport and Polish passport. When I could, I escaped Poland. I left Poland. I always joke about how terrible Poland is, but I think Poland has changed a lot. This was a long time ago. This was a long time ago when I left. It was 20 years ago. Right. And so when I was like 19, 20, something like that, I just left. I couldn't stand being in that household in that country, so I just left. Yeah, and then then the whole English adventure started, until I fell out of love with England, and I just tried again. I just tried something else. I got a job in China. Like I wasn't really technically planning to come here specifically. But okay. I just got a job here, and then I discovered, like, holy shit, like China has so many amazing places. My God.
Yeah.
Wow. I wish I knew that. Yeah.
So are you planning to stay in China, or you have another destination in your future?
Well, you know this. I'm not sure your listener know this. I very recently had this. I like to say I was given a second life,
Yeah.
I had a fall and I almost died. Mm-hmm. And now I'm in recovery. I'm learning how to walk again. I'm actually like walking. I'm like an 80-year-old. I'm walking now.
Wow.
And, I always, China has been good for like saving money, like for sure, right? Like it was financially, it's been great. So I was just thinking, like, when I'm 60 and I look back after being here 5 years now, if I look back, like, okay, I could say, yeah, I stayed for one more year and I saved this amount of money, or I could just go and travel the world, and just take 1 year sabbatical. 1 year, what the hell, like I can make memories for the lifetime. But the biggest thing was this injury, man. This injury was like just made me think like you have to really value life, and you got one life. And like, when am I going to go to Iceland and Egypt and all the other places, and like just do some remote places that I always wanted to go, but there's never time to go because you work. So I have to do it. So this summer I'm going back. I'm making Spain my home for the next year.
Oh, great!
And I'm just gonna go from Barcelona. Basically, I'm gonna go to different places. Yep.
Wow, that's fantastic. Now, is that going to be a sabbatical, or are you able to work remotely in your current job, or are you just going to leave and travel?
I'm leaving my job. Yeah.
So you touched on the topic of your injury. Now, you've already told this story on your podcast, and I don't want to steal your thunder. So I'm going to link your podcast episodes, there's 2 of them, down below for the listeners to go to the Chasing Bandos podcast and listen to what happened to Greeg. So I have a number of questions that I ask, I'm starting to ask everybody. I feel like I know the answer to this one, but what are some of your favorite adventures and explorers that you've been to that you're able to talk about publicly?
Wow, like
Yep.
This one is quite like, this one is like super obvious. Like, people ask.
Sorry, for those that are not watching the video, there is a picture behind Greeg of the Buran space shuttles. He's pointing to the space shuttles behind him.
Yes. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for being the host. Yes. People ask me like, what was your like favorite, the best day of your life, that kind of stuff, like favorite explorer, and it's hard to beat this one. Not just because of like the historical significance of those 2 shuttles being trapped in that hangar, not just because of the size of them and the fact that not many people have a chance to sit in that chair, the astronaut chair, which I had a chance to do it. But it's just that whole journey, man. It's the journey, what it took to do it, the training, the walking with that bag at night. Because I wasn't a hiker, I had to research this. Like, I had to learn about the distribution of weight in your bag. Right. And it's the bag that it's not the hike. It's not like walking, right? Like walking
it's the weight.
It's the weight, right, that kills you.
Yeah.
And you have to prepare. You have to bring the water because I was there on the site for 2 days. Slept in there. So just going through all of this, and I was super lucky, man. I was really lucky not to get caught and like just be successful in there. I did it after the launch. Because I figured that, like when you work in a company and there's some sort of project and everyone is like cramming towards the deadline and everyone is stressed and everything. That's how I felt about this place, that they have a launch, and I think they had a launch towards the end of September, and I thought to myself, like, after things like this, kind of like people relax a little bit, like, oh, it's over. Yeah. So I felt like the security would be much more relaxed after that, and I think I was right, because we went to like early October, and I saw the jeeps, I saw the security from the distance, from the building, but I was lucky no one ever entered the building, because I interview other explorers, and that very frequently happens when the security and the soldiers, they come in and they just listen. They listen for any sound. But I was lucky.
So when it comes to exploring, do you prefer to explore alone or with a group? And I feel like that answer might have changed since your recent event.
It's funny that you say this because, like, for me, I had, when it comes to my exploring life, there's two parts of it, right? There's like a pre-China and post-China. Pre-China, this was like a Greeg who was like exploring stuff, but had no idea that there are other people doing it. And so I was mainly by myself. Sometimes I would go with my brother. Sometimes I would I remember meeting the explorer from Bulgaria, Evgeny. I went to Bulgaria to see some places. He was showing me some places. I remember giving him like some like 50 euros something for his time.
Mm-hmm.
And after China, I would say, just because of the lack of explorers here, and just I didn't have anyone to link with. It's not just because I didn't want to, but like I just didn't have people to explore with. So I actually if that's the right word, I turned some people into explorers. So I went with some friends here, some Chinese friends who, after going exploring, they absolutely loved it. They loved it, and so they became explorers. They started going and explore places. Maybe they are not like so prolific, but they definitely love it. And mainly, I would go with one other person here. It was either them or it was my girlfriend from time to time. But I would go by myself many times. And after this injury, it's really hard for me to say this because exploring by yourself actually wasn't too bad. Like, it was like all your senses are working. You are very careful.
Totally.
I know how I sound right now. You are very careful, yeah, and then you almost died.
No, yeah,
yeah, but it's like you don't have to worry about anyone else. You decide on everything. And
totally get it. Yep.
Yeah, and it's just you, and so in a way, it is pretty awesome. But at the same time, I don't know. I think you need to. There's some pros and cons, and you need to decide for yourself. I mean, definitely, you should let someone know where you're going.
Totally.
Because
yeah.
And hey, if you don't hear from me, you need to come and help.
Yeah, this is where I'm at.
Because I'm dying here.
Having done the podcast for as long as you've done it and talked to and met as many explorers as you have, you've met a lot of interesting people. Who do you take inspiration from? Who are some of your favorite explorers out there that you that you follow and that sort of inspire you? You don't have to say me. It's just because I'm here. It's okay.
Yeah, it's Dave. It's Dave, guys. Canada is a gem. That's what I'm going to say. I want to go to Canada. Aniox, come on, let's do it. Yeah. Aniox and Kitzel, I want to do it.
Totally.
Yeah, you know what, Dave? It's funny that you say this because when you were asking this question, I started to think about this right away. And funny enough, what kind of comes to my mind actually is people that are not explorers, because I was during my time here in China, I went also to North Korea, to Pyongyang, and I am a little bit obsessed with North Korea. So in a way, I wanted to do something with North Korea on this podcast, and I kind of I kind of called it like a dark tourism. So I did this a 10-part mini series, and actually this series is actually quite one of the most popular. It's like one of the best episodes on North Korea. Some people just turn in for just that. But there were just people like the Sun Hyu Lee who escaped. Her story was just amazing.
That's crazy that you got her. That's amazing.
Yeah, and my final episode was with this guy Erlich Larsen. This guy who spent 10 years undercover in those throughout Europe, there are those like North Korean friendship associations or Korean friendship associations, and they're like those crazy people who like follow the regime and they like support the regime, but they are Westerners, and he like infiltrated this organization and actually went to North Korea and like expose the guys for like just basically being criminals for the criminal activity. And talking to him, you know, it kind of just gave me this feeling of like, it's just like, Dave, how many times have you heard people saying like, oh my God, you are brave for doing this, like this is so dangerous, you like you go to those places and it's dangerous and like you're so brave. And I'm thinking to myself like, okay, there is brave, but there is this guy, you know, there's this guy he did this. He was, you know, he actually risked his life, literally risked his life in order to expose this thing. And like, that's what I call bravery. That is,
I agree.
Yeah, he was really inspirational guy. And to hear him tell this story was amazing. Yeah, I actually feel like I should mention some explorers. Speaking of Danish people, there is an explorer called Jan Elhoy, and this is a Danish guy. He's actually on TV in Denmark. He's like a TV personality, but at the same time he does urbex. It's just amazing. And he was in a group of 4 explorers who went to Burand. And I like to say that in my previous life, before urbex, I saw an article of 4 guys. I think there were 2 Dutch guys and 2 Danish, maybe. Yeah. And this is the story I heard. And this is how I learned about the Burand. I was like, oh my God, how is this possible? Of those 4 guys just trucking through this desert and getting there. And I was just amazed. Yeah. And, you know, and now I do talk to these guys, and one of them has been exploring for over 40 years, and he's still exploring. And awesome. This guy is amazing. Yeah. So I love Jan Elhoy.
So talking about, you know, some of the larger risks that you've taken, and, you know, I've seen the places that you go, and they're some pretty legendary places, but have you had any serious run-ins with the law or not? I mean, security is whatever, but when you have problems with the law, that's a whole different story. Anything there?
How about Chinese national security?
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, so my first biggest trouble in China, I think it was maybe 5 or 6 months in. I'm here, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, once I got caught, right? And I was like, oh my God, Greg, like you just got here, and now you're gonna get deported. Like, you just literally got here, man. Like, come on. And okay, so there was a place that I thought was abandoned. How do I describe it? You must have heard of this plain bone graveyard in Arizona, where there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of planes. So I came across an article on Chinese media about a similar place, and that was the comparison. There to this American one, but in China. And then I started scanning the maps. They only mentioned the province, and then I went in there, and I just spent ages doing it. And I finally found it. And when I went there, I just started flying a drone, and like within like a minute, literally like a minute or two, a soldier on a scooter just like turns up and like, bring your drone back. And you know, I was I think right away when I started flying, I realized that something is wrong, because like I can see a column of soldiers walking, and you know, and some truck driving inside, right? But all I wanted to do is to, because the place was so huge, I wanted to fly my drone really far away so I can have like a shot of all the planes. But
Right.
you know, I'm just backing up with this drone, and then I see like the soldiers, and then I see the truck, and I'm like, wait a second, what the hell is happening? So I actually didn't really have time to think about it, because like
Right.
by the time I realized, he was already there, and I was taken to this interrogation, and it was just, it was 10 hours of like trying to explain why I have pictures of like tanks and planes on my
Oh my
laptop and on my,
God.
and you see, and in that moment everything makes you look guilty, because like, have you ever taken pictures of military equipment? Well,
Right.
yeah, but they all abandoned.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I had a lot of explaining to do. They interviewed my girlfriend at the time, and she basically, what they did was they tried to see if we would have the same story, if any discrepancies between what we were saying.
Right.
With me, they at least like offered me some water. With her, like they didn't offer her anything. So when I saw her in the room, it was crazy. But so this was like very scary for me, mainly because there was a lot of waiting. I didn't know what was happening, and the uncertainty of everything. But eventually, like there is this like a bit of a common sense being applied here, and they realized, that I wasn't a spy, essentially, because that was like the assumption, right?
Right.
Yeah, and last year I have went through the same thing. Basically, I went through exactly the same thing. This time, it was a place there was a bunch of raiders. Yeah, and it was just exactly the same story. Yeah.
Oh man, the things we do, eh? Okay, let's move on now. We're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about your podcast, the Chasing Bandos podcast, the big kahuna, the big urbex podcast that everybody listens to. You've talked to everyone from the big dogs to the little pups and everyone in between. You're coming up on your 100th episode. You've had 100,000 downloads plus at this point, major milestone. What made you decide to jump into podcasting?
It was the same story as you, Dave. Exactly the same story. I was invited to a photography podcast. I was asked to appear as a guest. And after that, I thought to myself, and it was also Corona. This was during Corona.
Right.
So we were all kind of stuck at home as well. I also broke up with my girlfriend. So all of a sudden, there was more time. So kind of like everything kind of lined up. And I thought to myself, wow, this is pretty cool. And I really didn't see any podcasts about urbex. Like I didn't. I think in the past I would find something that people had some attempts, but they didn't really follow up and they were not consistent, and they stopped. But I just thought to myself, you know what? I don't have exploring friends in China. I really don't know how things are in America, in Canada, in Europe. Like I don't know what motivations people have and why they do this. So in a way, it was like a little therapy session for me. And I really, really admire the explorers, and they give me the motivation. Because like many times I would ask myself like, oh my God, okay, right. Should I do this? Do I go and do I do this again? Do I get in trouble again? But then the moment, the moment I heard someone being passionate about exploring and telling me stories, I was right away. I was like, whoa, yeah, boom. It's like a boost of energy. And then here we go. Yes.
Yeah, totally. And it's other, I think you make a good point. Other explorers will give you the push to push your own boundaries. Like, I know I've done things that other people have looked up to. And then the same with me, there's other explorers out there that are doing stuff that blow my mind. And it's like, man, I got to get out of these stupid houses and hospitals and find something bigger, something more. But where I live, there's only so much, and I don't have I don't currently have the ability or the means to travel to Europe like a lot of people do, or all over the United States like other people do. But it is listening to other people's stories and seeing other people's pictures that do inspire you and make you really realize that you got to push your boundaries and try something else. And that's where like I'll sit here at home thinking like, man, what can I do next? I've done this prison, I've done this power plant, I've done this time capsule. What can I find? What can I make my next project? And you're right. It's listening to other people's stories that make me want to do better. Right.
Yeah. And you are very creative, Dave. And you you're always looking for, that's the impression I get, like you're looking for like this is a project, like you're looking for something.
Always.
You're not you don't just settle with like, I go exploring and I'm fine with it. I just like, you always try to do something with it, like documentary or this, or now it's a podcast. So like, look, people like you, this is example of what I'm talking about. I love to hear and talk to people like you.
That's great. I really appreciate that. I'm glad to be one of those people. So talking about people that are nothing like me, we're going to talk about some of the big dogs in the hobby. You have talked to people in different countries, people of different abilities, and you've talked to some of the real OGs. You talked to Moses Gates, Bradley Garrett, and John Law. All the way from the top of the big dogs, again, like I said, down to modern day explorers. So in your experience in talking with all of these different types of people, like Moses, Bradley, and John, what do you see as the differences between the old generation and the current generation of explorers? Is there like a difference, like a major difference between the way, their way of thinking versus our way of thinking? And, what do you see anything there that's sort of conversation worthy?
This is a difficult question. This is it's one of those questions where I don't instantly have an answer. I am thinking, I did talk to, they're great, like John Law, my God, like the guy, you could spend 24 hours and he wouldn't shut up, and you would be like hearing, no, I mean it in like a positive way, like
a good way.
Yeah. It will be a story after story after story, and amazing. I think it was just different world back then. I think the social media has a different effect on people. I think back then it was about experiencing making the memories. It was actually experiencing the place. John Law goes exploring he still goes, by the way, 60-year-old, he still goes. Yeah. He said to me, like, the people I go to, they are really good photographers. So I don't really take pictures. They're like, I just let them take pictures. And so the guy goes and he just experiencing it. Now, people like Moses Gates or Steve Duncan, back in the day, or those OG guys from the UK scene, from the 28 Days Later, this was like, there was no Instagram. They had their own websites. So in order for the community to know what was happening, people would wait until this guy makes a post about like what he's done or what she's done. And it was like people took more effort to describe the whole journey. Those posts were very, very much like, there's a lot of details there, describing the whole adventure. Sharing the pictures was obviously very important, but I don't think it was as important as it is now. And it was more about having that experience of being somewhere and like, experiencing the place.
Yeah, and I think with time, a lot of that is getting lost, and now it's about the shot and not so much telling the story, which is one of the reasons why I like the podcast and B, something like, say, my website or some other friends of ours who have websites where you actually tell a story and you're not just blasting pictures out there. There's always a story behind the experience, right?
And Dave, this is exactly like why I started asking people, like, would you go exploring without camera? And I think it's a difficult question.
It's totally it's a hard question to answer because that would be a totally different experience. But you want to know something? The day you go exploring without a camera is when the coolest shit is going to happen. And the one thing you really want to capture on camera, it's going to be that day that you don't have your camera with you, you know?
Yeah.
So on the same page, talking about the different types of people who you've talked to from different eras of the hobby, you've heard all about drama and politics from Europe, the USA, and Canada. If anyone that I know is qualified to answer this question, it's you. Do the drama and politics and overbearing opinions of exploring cross borders?
No.
Or is the culture the same no matter where we go?
The same cesspool everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. And you know, it's funny because today I talked to Silogen, who is a bit of an OG guy back in the day. He was the Drain King, and he told me, don't bother with the politics. Just avoid that. Avoid the group politics. And and I just think that, you know, we have a very broad spectrum of people. First of all, people who are doing this hobby. We have, you know, all sorts of walk of life. You know, from teachers to shop assistants, or from, you know, professors to
even have cops doing it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. So I think with this, and also it's like I think you must be a little bit of a rebel inside, right, in order to do this.
You have to be,
because like ultimately you are doing something that's not. It's kind of on a gray area, and people have their own opinions. It's not like there's a 10 commandments and there's a, you know, bunch of laws and they tell you like what to do, what not to do. It's more of a common sense and like what it's right for you to do. And a lot of the times those conflicts, they come from maybe lack of communication. We communicate online through text. And it is different. I think if all those conversations were, you know, video call or face to face, I'm sure that majority of them wouldn't happen.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And people feel like a little bit overprotected. There is this kind of like a little bit of bravado and like this whole idea of like, you know, I've done the work. I found this place. I don't want to like make this easy for someone else because like I've spent so much time doing this. So why should I just give this to someone and then they spend no effort whatsoever. So you see, when people see this, when other explorers see other people just like willy-nilly sharing stuff and trading and all this stuff, it makes your blood boil, I think, and maybe that's where those reactions are coming from. And there's so much gossip and things like that, and judging, and so you know, I don't want to be over negative because quite frankly, most of the stuff does not apply to me. But I just hear this, like, you know, if you have an interview with an explorer and you bring this topic, there's always something, which is unfortunate. But like, who was it? Like, I think Sonny Sony, exploring with Sony, he said like, why can't we just all be friends, guys? Like, come on, like, can't we just all get along? Let's just get along, you know? It's some shitty abandoned place, guys. Come on. Right?
Yeah, you know, I think about other hobbies. I think about like if I decided to quit exploring and take up knitting, is there going to be someone in the knitting community who's going to contact my employer because they don't like me?
Yes. Or you know what? If there is an archery competition and then you have two guys competing against each other, hating each other, I'm sure they have some like their own drama, their own archery clubs. You know, this club is better than you guys, and like I'm sure there's
and like I know like in bird photography, okay. When there is an owl's, if it's owls, I don't know what it's called, where an owl's nest, where owls are hanging out, or a fox's den. Photographers are so secretive because, you know, if I find a fox's den that has baby foxes, I'm going to go take pictures of that fox's den and I'm going to tell a couple of friends. But you're not supposed to tell publicly where that fox's den is because everybody will congregate on that fox's den and take pictures and cause damage to the den and possibly the fox. Same thing goes with owls. When there's an owl's nest up in a tree, everybody wants to take a picture of the great horned owl or the white snowy owl. And it's just like exploring. You're supposed to be secretive of the location of the eagle, of the owl, of the fox's den, so that people don't congregate and en masse go to that location. It's exactly like there's probably, I hate to say the name, there's probably a Bill Finnan of the bird photography community.
Yeah. There must be. Guys, we need to know where all the owls are. Share those locations of those owls. Come on.
There's a Discord.
There's a Discord, yeah.
But I mean, talking about, you know, I just find I have in this hobby, it's been 11 years for me. I've met the best people I've ever met. And I've met the absolutely worst pieces of shit that I've ever met in my life in this hobby. People who, you know, if you give one slight against them, that means to them, the world is theirs to destroy your life. You know, I said something negative about you. Well, now I'm gonna phone your wife. I'm gonna tell your wife that you've had an affair. I'm gonna call your boss at work and tell him what you do for a hobby. I'm gonna ruin your life just because I said something against you. Like, what kind of people does this hobby? You know,
Dave, there are so many narcissists. There's so many narcissists in this hobby, and I think, and it's and I think social media like exacerbates that, makes it worse. Yeah.
Anyways, this is a topic I could go on about forever, but I just know bringing it up will just cause unnecessary drama in my life, so I'm going to move on back to the podcast. So you've talked to so many people. Who is on your wish list that you have not yet interviewed? Who are you trying to get that you haven't got yet?
Yeah, so what I do is behind the scenes, I am trying to come up with like the mini series, because we finished the mini series. I had 3 mini series on the pod. It was Chernobyl, North Korea, and Buran. And there's obviously so many explorers that I would like to talk to, but they just don't speak good English. Like the English is not good enough for the podcast, right? So unfortunately, that's the case. But there are those like OG, old school explorers that I from like the British scene and some Australians as well. And I have to say, like Steve Duncan, I was so close. Like, this guy is a legend, absolute legend. I already talked to him on the phone and everything, and it's just so hard to get through to this guy. and all of a sudden, it's just like it just never happened. It just never happened. Like it's like the contact stopped. And I was so excited to talk to him. And maybe I took too long to organize, but I don't know. But I kind of work. I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but I kind of worked on the history of Urbex miniseries.
Okay.
And it's just taking so long. This is taking so long because it's just something I don't want to do it. I don't want to make mistakes with this,
Yeah.
Like, so I'll give you an example. So Suicide Club and John Law, right? Like late 1970s with like exploring in San Francisco. Like what I could do is just talk to John Law and just get his word for it, and like just do that, use him, right? But like John Law sees this through his own eyes, right? There were many other members of that club that might see this from a different perspective. And so trying to find those people, trying to talk to them, trying to convince them to talk to me, it is difficult. I genuinely sometimes think that this is never gonna finish this. But I'm trying. I'm trying. I was also interviewing people that I spent ages. I spent hours talking to, and then all of a sudden they changed their mind and they were like,
"Oh wow,
don't use this. I don't want to be involved anymore." And to be honest, like it's my audio, right? But I respect their opinion, like I respect the decision, so I just don't want to be an asshole. But there's, I would say, those old school explorers. I just love those stories of like how it was back in the day, what they went through, cracking those like London underground stations, like abandoned stations, from World War II. Like it's just insane stuff.
So keeping on the topic of podcasts, there's a few of us now. So you've got Mr. P does a podcast. Matthew from Abandoned America, he's got one. Kay from No Tracer, they've got one. Now you've got me. Do you see this getting competitive and getting ugly, or do you think we can all coexist in the podcasting universe?
I would say, the guy from Abandoned America. Someone, I think Justin mentioned this guy to me. I think I would like to talk to him for sure. No Traces is a bit different, I would say. There's a different format there. I think you are going to do video as well. You said that. I don't know what's your, like, do you plan to focus on Canada? Do you plan to focus like on anyone?
Anyone. Like there is right now there's really there is no podcast in Canada for exploring. So I am going to focus a lot on who we have here in Canada. But I mean, I definitely want to bring in more and more international explorers for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. No. Like, listen, Dave. Ultimately, it's another story that the listener can listen to. So those times where you are on the road, you're driving somewhere, and someone can pick up a episode here, episode there, and all of a sudden your whole journey just went. Listen to 3 different stories. Amazing. So for me, it's like this idea of like, if I can somehow contribute to your experience of exploring. I've been told how people would listen to a podcast in the car, and it would take them ages because they would pause and they would discuss. It's just amazing to hear that. I would love if we all, I think I mentioned this to you privately, right? Like if we the hosts, if we have like an annual meeting where we just talk smack about the podcasting,
once experiences,
once a year, I think it would be nice. And I think in this hobby in Urbex, like we just mentioned before, there's a lot of drama, a lot of animosities. I think if we can lead by example by supporting each other, I think that would be great. I think that would be amazing.
2 more questions. If there's a young explorer out there who's ready to pick up a camera and get into the hobby and start exploring, what advice would you give to that person?
I would say, if that person really likes the abandoned places and they discover this and they want to do it, I would say, you know what? Just make those mistakes, dude. Like, I don't think nothing I will say to this person is gonna change. Who can change someone's mind these days, or who can tell you what to do? Like, I think it's unfortunately, I think it's part of the game. All those mistakes that we made when we were starting, asking for locations, or just being like such a idiots and just
we've all done it.
Like not knowing, and someone is being a dick to you and pointing out to you, like we had that debate about elitism, right? And I think you just need to find out. You just really need to find out, because like how else are you going to learn? And if you do find out and you don't change your behavior, then not worth it, because this is a special hobby. This is really something that changed my life, and I almost died, but I'm not gonna stop it because of it.
Right.
I'm gonna try to look more closely at the floor, but I will not stop it. And I think that's where I would go with that.
I have my last question is something that I'm keeping track of. I was trying to think of, what can I do like you do with rapid fire that will, carry on from every episode and I can keep track of. So the question is, what is in your camera bag?
What is in my camera bag? Dave, my opinion on tripods and stuff like that, and I travel light. I really don't like bringing a lot of things. And also the thing is, this might come as a surprise, I don't really consider myself a photographer. I would just say that I'm more like an explorer with a camera. I have one lens. I have one lens.
I got two. Yeah. So the question is though, what kind of camera are you using?
Yeah, I have my Sony. I have my Sony.
Okay.
A7R3. I will not leave the house without the drone. My little bird. It's always in my bag. Camera is in my bag. Lately, I would bring GoPro. And use it from time to time, but it's like most of the time I'm really frustrated with it. What else do I bring? I bring wet wipes. I think you know why. And bottle of water, and that's it.
Hand sanitizer, wet wipes, bottle of water.
Pretty
good.
much.
Okay. So you're Sony. So what I'm keeping track of is how many people are Nikon versus Canon versus Sony. So I don't have enough data right now to put it up, but we're going to keep track of that.
Dave, I just don't you think that the current cameras, the technology is so great that does it really matter? Like,
it probably doesn't matter. They're all the same. Same technology.
Yeah, I just because I am not a photographer, and one of the things I am looking forward to is to this year, to meet explorers and travel. When I told people that I'm going back to Europe, I already been invited to trips. So I'll be like a tourist, basically.
Right. Yeah.
But actually, I think one of the things that I'm really looking forward to, not just the fact that meeting the people that I talk to, and explore with them, and but actually just to see what do they do, to see how they take pictures. I would like to observe them. I would like to ask them questions, because I don't really, this idea I go in, I take my photo, and then I just whatever looks good to me, I take pictures of, and then I don't know. I don't really spend too much thinking about this whole photography. I really don't.
Right. Okay, interesting. Okay. Anything else you want to add? Have we missed anything? Anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I really appreciated that you wanted to have me on very early on in your podcasting career. I really appreciate that, Dave. I always enjoy listening to you, and I always, whenever, like, you are one of those people now that it's kind of like almost like a go-to. I find excuses to bring my favorite people on the pod with those different kind of ideas, like debate this or Bill Finnan's birthday, or other things. So I just really appreciate the fact that we got to know each other a little bit, and I really hope that there will be a chance for me to fly to Canada and
totally.
And meet and like just go and do something, go and to see some shitty house in Canada.
Yes, we don't have space shuttles in Canada, but I'll take you to something pretty cool.
Yeah. No, but that's really it. And then best of luck, and you will. I'm sure you know by now how much time it takes to edit.
It is a lot of work. It is a lot of work, especially adding the video component adds even more. Because when you're talking, I'm overlaying footage and pictures. It's not, it's not just splicing up the audio. Now it's a whole other. Anyways, Greg, thanks so much for joining us on the episode 3 of the All Access Freaktography podcast. Thanks for being here. It's almost your bedtime over there in China. So thanks for joining us, everybody. All of Greg's links are down below. Make sure you're following the Chasing Bandos podcast and Greeg Abandon. All of his links are down below. Thanks for coming, Greg. See you next time.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, guys, that was Greeg Abandon. What a great interview. I knew he was going to be good. I knew he was going to have a lot of great stories and some really good insights. I don't know very many people in this hobby that have met and or talked to as many people as him. So he's got some great insights into the hobby. And again, hit the links down below. Follow and subscribe to the Chasing Bandos podcast, and also follow Greeg Abandon on his personal account. Now, I touched on Greg and his accident, and he was at a power plant in China, and he fell through a floor, and he dropped 5 stories. And one of the only things that saved him was the fact that he landed on a soft pile of coal, ash, and dust. He did end up really hurting himself. He had to call emergency services to come and get him. He's now got pins and rods in his leg. It goes without saying in this hobby that safety is of the utmost importance. And while we all say, I'm very careful, I'm as careful as I can be, no matter how careful you are, something can happen. So it is now Urbex book club time, and we're going to open up the Access All Areas book like we do at the end of every episode. And I'm going to find something that we talked about in the podcast and see what Jeff Chapman, also known as Ninjalicious, had to say about that very topic in 2005. So today we're going to the portion called Abandoned Sites, and we're going to go to page 89 where Jeff talks about safety issue. This is highly relevant to what happened to Greg. Unfortunately, there's a good possibility of getting injured at abandoned sites. If you aren't careful, and sometimes even if you think you are, getting a tetanus shot in advance is both fun and practical. When you're visiting an abandoned site, bear in mind that the building is not meant for use by the general public, and that is entirely up to you to keep yourself alive. Explore abandoned sites slowly, dress sensibly, and don't go alone. When navigating an abandoned building, don't place too much confidence in floors and ceilings. In many old buildings, there are large holes in the floors, or the floors are so old and flooded that they're on the very verge of collapse. Stay away from sagging floors. Test the floors in buildings the same way you would test thin ice. And remember that sections of abandoned buildings do occasionally just topple, even when there's no one in them. There it is, guys. There's a little bit of insight from Jeff Chapman, the late, great Ninjalicious, a pioneer of the hobby as we know it now, in his book, Access All Areas. There is a link in the description down below where you can go to Amazon and order yourself a copy of Access All Areas. So real quick before we wrap up, I'll give you guys a little bit of a heads up of what's coming up in the next few weeks. Next week, we're going to talk to Ethan Minnie. Next, we're going to talk to Brent from Abandoned Urbex Canada. I'm hoping to get an interview with my good friend Germ9. He was instrumental in helping to mold and guide me into the type of explorer that I am and how I document and how I operate my own website. Very good friend of mine. We're going to talk to him. Next, very exciting, we do have an episode lined up with a criminal lawyer, and she's going to talk to us for about a half an hour about some of the things we need to keep in mind when it comes to the law and what some of the ramifications can be to trespassing, breaking and entering, some things that you might want to keep in mind when you're exploring if you don't want to get in trouble with the law. So that's it, guys. This has been episode 3. We're still here. We're still doing it. Thanks so much for being here. Again, like I said earlier, whatever podcast channel you're listening to, if you're able to give this podcast a review, please do. That's it, guys. Gotta go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you guys next week. Peace.